You look at the benchmarks of everything it can do, and it keeps blasting through them at a faster rate every day. And it's quickly going to become, do you trust your humans to do more than you trust the AI to do? Obviously, you need that sort of governance human to jump in and flip the switch or to have the red Terminator button. But do you trust your people more than an agent that's smarter than your people and has access to all the data and isn't emotional and doesn't need sleep and doesn't need coffee breaks?
Welcome to the AI Grapple podcast. My name is Kate vanderVoort, founder and CEO of Social Mediology and the AI Success Lab. Today's guest is Chris Singel, a digital marketer, AI optimist, and comedian who's been navigating the internet since the days of dial-up. He's worked with major brands like Funny or Die, launched his own agency, Delta Digital, and even used AI to write a book about AI in just 12 minutes. In this episode, we grapple with the big questions. Will AI make us more creative or just replace us? What happens when search engines become answer engines? And most importantly, can AI ever master comedy? Chris brings sharp insights, laughs, and a refreshingly human take on the future of AI. Let's dive on in. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the AI Grapple podcast. It is great to have you here.
Hi, Kate. Great to be here.
Now, listen, I would love to hear a little bit about your background and how it is that you have come to be working in the space of AI and being passionate about AI. Give us just a nice brief introduction.
Yeah, I'm trying to filter it down because it starts in middle school with dial-up internet and, updating my local movie theater's website in the 90s, and then got into politics and went to DC for college. And I got a major in in public policy and a minor in applied ethics. And that led me into comedy, obviously, because there's a longer joke there. So I wound up doing comedy in Chicago for a little while, wound up in Los Angeles at Funny or Die, Will Ferrell's internet comedy company, then comedy.com before that, and then a nice girl from Grand Rapids. Wound up back here in the Midwest of the United States. I know most of your listeners are probably Australian. And then in March 2023, I was in the shower and I thought, hey, Google Bard released their chatbot 2 days ago. Can I use AI to write a book about AI? And then 12 minutes of work later, I had my rough draft published, and then I did a little digital marketing behind it. And 2 days after that, it was a #1 new release on Amazon. So took that out to some local news stations, which eventually turned into a TED Talk. And now I consult with businesses about AI and comedy and digital marketing and all that fun stuff.
Isn't it amazing that you can bring together all of those loves in one little package? And
who would have thought, Well, and I think you and I were chatting briefly before we hit record, but I think my big thing is just don't be scared of it. And I think that comedy helps to put people at ease and say, just try it. And even if you use it to write a short story or a joke, see that it's not this big, scary Skynet thing to be afraid of. It's a tool you can use like any other.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to dive into all of that. And I'm really looking forward to the fact that often our conversations on this podcast can get a bit deep as we grapple with some of the big issues. Feel free to bring any humor and comedy that you would like to the conversation.
Well, I'm a big sci-fi fan, so the book I'm reading right now is about a different planet falling apart. So I think we're going to survive a little longer than the Expanse series, but it's very good if you haven't read it yet. So go ahead.
Great. I interviewed someone recently who works in robotics and surgery, and he also on the side writes medical AI thrillers.
Cool.
You might be interested in some of those books.
I love it. I'll have to look back through your recent podcasts and check it out.
So, Chris, as you said, you've worked in digital marketing since the early days of the internet, not to make you sound old. But we know that AI is really making marketing more efficient. Is there a risk of losing creativity or originality as we get into this world of sort of automation and AI?
Yeah, I do think it's a concern. I will also say, having worked in agencies, once you hit a certain scale, you lose some of that creativity. When you're just churning out ad copy and images, it can already drain some of that creativity back. My hope is by streamlining the process and using the tools available to you, it actually puts some of that creativity back in. So now a designer isn't moving an icon 2 pixels to the left. They're really thinking, what does this brand mean? What am I trying to convey? What marketing message will resonate with their target audience, and putting in the effort that actually matters and letting AI do the work.
Yeah, we were just having this conversation in our coaching program before I got on this podcast around this concept of, does it make us dumber or does it make us smarter, and where does creativity kind of fit in that? And I'm very much of the view that if we use it properly in a human-centered, ethical, responsible way, we really bring the best of ourselves and all of our skills and our wisdom and our experience. And for me, AI stretches me to be far more creative and to actually have the headspace to think outside of the box. And when you start to really get that it can run processes on your business and take strategies to the stratosphere that you never would have before, one of my favorite prompts is come up with 5 out-of-the-box ideas that I would never have even considered. And it really just takes you, hologram speaking on conference stages around the world, those sorts of out there thinking. So, I think it's got the potential to do either, right? Depending on how humans choose.
I love that. And so in my experience, obviously the book, it was 99 cents on Amazon. It was not a very good book. I'm not encouraging your readers to buy it, but it did have some insights that I would not have thought of. It certainly was able to produce it way quicker than I could have. And then I could spend my time telling that story to human beings and making that human connection and explaining, hey, this is a tool that took me 12 minutes, but now we have something to talk and connect about. So beyond that, I think, just letting your people be people and letting the robots do the work is sort of my overarching byline here that I'm trying to encourage out in the world. So I don't know if that has resonated fully through to people yet, or if they're still scared of the machines, but it sounds like you're hearing both from people.
Yeah, well, and I also find a lot of people just want to outsource what they're doing, kind of like you might have done with the book the first time round, that it's like, just write me this book. And then people in the same breath will say they're worried about being replaced by AI, and they're kind of doing it themselves by just saying, here, do this for me. And, in
there's
doing
this element
that,
of, right. Yeah. How much do you care? If it's like a rough draft or a TPS report that nobody's actually going to review internally at your work, fine, automate it and let it go by the wayside. Or if it's a book where the story is about the book itself and not necessarily that it's Shakespeare or Hemingway, then fine, churn out something in 12 minutes because that's the story. But if that frees you up to spend the time making it more interesting, or as silly as it sounds, working on better prompts, making it more meaningful, I think one example I have is I was writing a sci-fi book just for fun, and I prompted it to expand upon it. And it was terrible, and it didn't have a lot to work with. But I then prompted it, hey, I want the ethos of this philosopher written in the style of this science fiction humorist. And it did amazing because it had more data to work with. It could pull from those sources and aggregate it together. And that allowed me to think like, okay, so if this is the vibe I'm going for, obviously I don't want to publish something that basically said, steal this idea and apply it in this author's style of writing. But it helps me sort of think, what do you want this to look like? And how can we provide AI the data that's meaningful internally to get the results we want externally?
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about just being able to tell that human story. Is you can get AI to do all the mundane, repeatable strategy outlines, but then you can bring, the best of who you are to that and be more human. So on this concept of being human, we're seeing AI generated content just flooding the internet, social media. It's getting harder and harder to tell what is real anymore. So you used to be or have been deeply involved in search engine optimization. From a marketing perspective, how do you see Google and other search engines adapting to AI? I mean, we're starting to hear terms like AEO with answer engine optimization.
Yeah.
How do you see all of that unfolding?
And I don't know how deeply you or your listeners dove into the Google AMP experience when they provided this new web framework effectively that would make web page speeds load faster and it would be more effective for web scraping. And then they canceled it a couple years in because it really didn't move the needle. It didn't make a big difference. And then they did something similar with Google Answers where they said, oh, it's a 0-click result. We'll populate the answer from your website before anyone even has to click. Well, but then they're not on my website. They're not purchasing my products. They're not learning about me if they never click through it. So again, it's sort of this balance of what's good for the user versus what's good for the company's advertising on Google. And now you have these AIs that are responding saying, hey, if you want a good Thai food restaurant in your area, here's what we searched and found. But how did it find that? Is it classic SEO or did it hallucinate a response that the restaurant doesn't even exist? I think that's very concerning, both for consumers and businesses, because it's very possible that the AI doesn't know what it's talking about, and it's going to very quickly be gamed and or paid promotion. So then it becomes, there's already tons of stories of, hey, how do I make a cheese pizza? And it pulls up a Reddit response that was a joke from 10 years ago. You add glue to it. Okay, so that's not great AI. And at what point do we as people need to push back? And then if you care about the business side of things, as businesses push back and say, hey, look, these AI generated answers are so wrong that it's harming my business. I don't know if there's a way to combat that when you're Google, but I do think that conversation is going to start soon.
It's an interesting one, though, because, I mean, I see a lot of those things unfolding and everyone gets up in arms. You know, how many R's are there in strawberry? And create me a plain white square, and it totally gaslights you by putting 30 items in the image and says, it is a plain white square. Like, it's not a plain white square. So I think, you know, we have to remember this is early days with the technology, right? And I think some of us in AI forget that. Some people still haven't had their ChatGPT moment yet. And, you know, we have such high expectations of the technology already. So I think absolutely people need to know about hallucinations, and that's why you've got to bring your own discernment and intuition and your own skills to the table. But I just recently, have you tried the Perplexity agent on your phone?
Not on my phone, but I've played with it a little bit before. Yeah, with
so I have it on
search
my
responses.
I have it on my phone, and I just swipe up from the bottom corner and I say, find me local Thai restaurants and one that has outdoor seating, and find availability for 6 p.m. And it tells me the restaurants. And I've done it quite a few times now because it's been away for a bit, and it's actually accurate. And it will even go and make the booking for you and then send my partner a text saying, hey, here's the details for the restaurant. And
it's so fun.
It hasn't been talked about a lot, the Perplexity phone app, but I'm finding that new agent to be quite mind-blowing. And I'm very conscious of hallucinations and it making stuff up. But I do think businesses, and I'm interested in your reflections on this, really need to start thinking, you know, the research and what we're starting to do around these answer engine optimization. There is a particular way to structure your content on blogs, on your website, so that it does start to surface for AI search. But it's really interesting how Google was search and now it's gone AI, and then AI platforms are now going search. And it'll be fascinating to see, you know, do some of these platforms bring out paid to be seen? And I think all of that's fascinating. But are you starting to look at the real strategy, I guess, like we had to with SEO around what it means in the AI world?
And frankly, I think a lot of SEO opportunities are pretty low-hanging fruit for people where they've always relied on word-of-mouth marketing, referral marketing. They might not have social media pages with their name, address, phone number linking back. They might have been listed in a press publication 2 years ago, but never linked it to their website or never linked back from their website to that press. So little things that say, hey, we're a legitimate business, and yes, we're located here, and yet set up a Google My Business profile, like very basic things that companies can do that they forget exist and sometimes need a little hand-holding to be reminded of. And I think Google's getting better at reminding them, hey, if you own this business, what are your hours? Are you open on this holiday? Where Google needs that information from real people because you still want to profit as a business, right? So it's, again, that balance of how is Google being the middleman between what you want to know and providing it from the business, if that makes sense. But for the answer space, I think it's difficult to say exactly where it shakes out, right? Because I do think the implication here, though, which is maybe a broader conversation, which you warned me in advance, we can get pretty deep pretty fast. Someone is going to own this, right? And it's going to be very, very valuable. Is it going to be Meta or Google or OpenAI? But eventually there will be a clear or not winner or two, possibly three, but that's not really how power structures work, saying, hey, if you want to know a thing, just go to the one thing. And for the last 15, 20 years, it's been just Google it. But is that going to change when you need a little more thought put into it? Or does Google already have that name advantage in people's brand space thinking? I'm not sure.
I rarely go to Google anymore. I predominantly use ChatGPT or Perplexity as my search engines. And 9 times out of 10, I'm getting much more tailored, personalized responses in exactly the way that I need, as opposed to having to filter through paid ads, the algorithms.
I often find myself scrolling past the first 3 paid results on Google, and I'm like, why am I doing it this way? And then I was looking at the data on how people younger than me, and I won't age ourselves, but how frequently they use TikTok for research. And maybe that's going away if TikTok gets banned and unbanned. But like, they just want short form video to explain it to them, and I don't blame them. And in my day, Vine wasn't that useful, but they want a way that speaks to them and the algorithm's good. And that could be anywhere. And it might be an app that doesn't exist yet and takes over the world next week. And that's one of the most interesting but scary pieces of this is how do you provide all that data on every platform so that every AI can read it without giving up all of your relevant data? It's a balance.
Yeah, and we saw it with social media platforms, right? When there was Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and then all the ones that have come and gone and MySpace.
Some fun local ones. Yeah, Foursquare, and there's a couple other good local IQ ones.
Foursquare. Yeah. I was from there in so many places, and I was so sad when that stopped being a thing. In fact, Foursquare, every time I came to the US, I ended up connecting with people in ways that just would never have happened if it wasn't for Foursquare. So yes, I miss Foursquare.
I missed Foursquare. And there's something nice about, I could use AI tomorrow to rebuild a version of Foursquare if I wanted to. It's just what has sticking power and social media influence. As much as you and I know social media might be declining, but there's still a social power, social proof, and who's actually using things that's valuable to people.
Yeah, I actually don't think we have whatever's going to fill the void yet, because
I don't either.
It strikes me that, the default mechanism now is mistrust. No one really trusts anything. Even I got an email today from someone saying, hi, I'm trying to track down Kate vanderVoort, and it's at my email address. And I'm like, who are you? And what are you trying to track me down for? And
weird.
I'm immediately suspicious. But I can't see how social media platforms are going to exist in the way that they do now if no one trusts a thing that they see on there. You don't even know if it's your real friend sending you a friend request anymore. Could be anything.
I wished my wife's grandmother a happy birthday, and she's like, that's not me. That's a fake profile. Someone had built a Facebook profile with the wrong birthday on it. And I don't know. She was like, thanks for thinking of me. So lovely to hear from you. And one of the other scary statistics you hear is kids in high school using deepfakes to make nude photos of their classmates is like terrifying. And how do you prevent that when it's just a dumb kid, but also a really, really awful thing to do? It's just the kids have access to these technologies and are frankly probably smarter with it than we are. So is all of this happening too fast? Maybe, but genie's out of the bottle, right?
Yeah, I think we will. Well, the recent changes in America have probably accelerated as opposed to put safety guardrails. But when you look at, not to get too deep on the geopolitical issues around AI, but, the EU have got a massive focus on safety and ethics and responsibility. And that's got massive ramifications for the EU in terms of how they progress business-wise. And then you've got America, and then you've got China, and you've got the rest of us trying to figure out what you're all doing.
Yeah.
It will be very interesting, because I think there are going to be, I talk a lot about how bumpy the next few years are going to be. There will absolutely be huge job losses. There will absolutely probably be lives lost as AI starts to make decisions and maybe doesn't always get it right.
Yeah.
A lot of those second and third tier sort of issues are not really being discussed a lot yet, which is
Yeah.
why I love having these
I think
conversations.
I think it's unlikely someone logs onto Google and believes that the best way to make a cheese pizza is to add Elmer's glue to it. Except, how pervasive is that? And what are you not finding from your Google searches? Just like eye drops or something in the sci-fi book I'm reading, I'm sorry. But like if you have an eye condition and it recommends the wrong thing and you go blind, who's liable for that AI? Google, the owner? There's a hot thing in AI called governance right now of where does the buck stop effectively? Who's in charge of what the AI is putting out? Because you can't train it perfectly. And even the best AI engineers have good training models, but they don't know every specific thought the AI has and every data set it pulls from. There might be errors in that. And when I try to encourage people, I say, look, I'm a terrible driver. A Tesla is probably safer at driving itself than I am, but is a Tesla going to eventually get someone killed? Probably, yeah. So do we want the benchmark to be better than humans, or do we want it to be perfect? I think the answer is somewhere in between there, and where exactly is going to be debated for a long, long time to come.
Well, and that who's responsible, because it's, we can all individually have ethical, responsible use of AI at the heart of what we do. But ultimately, there is no playbook at the moment about who is responsible and who should be having the safety conversations and putting those guardrails in place.
But I do want to go back to something you said real quick about Europe setting some stricter rules than America probably is. And without getting into the politics of that, we're all interconnected and we're all on the internet. So I remember when GDPR came out and all of a sudden, hey, if you have a website and you don't want to get sued in Europe, you have to meet some minimum standards, and privacy policies rolled out everywhere and terms and conditions rolled out everywhere. And it's not just, we're all going to steal your data and do everything we can because someone is going to sue you eventually. And, it might take a little while to figure these things out, but I'm hopeful that we will have enough people with enough sensible regulations to prevent the worst things from happening.
I mean, realistically, most governments are only just getting their head around what social media has meant for society. And that's taken 15 years. Or more, and we don't have the luxury of waiting that long with AI. Yeah, they're all really big questions. I don't have answers to them. I just keep asking the questions because I think we really need to keep having those conversations.
It's funny. I found an old article where in 2019 I was talking about using AI, and now it was like, in a few years it might be able to do this, and now we're really talking in months, weeks of when it'll really be possibly smarter than humans. I mean, you look at the benchmarks of everything it can do, and it keeps blasting through them at a faster rate every day. And it's quickly going to become, do you trust your humans to do more than you trust the AI to do? Obviously, you need that sort of governance human to jump in and flip the switch or to have the red Terminator button. But do you trust your people more than an agent that's smarter than your people and has access to all the data and isn't emotional and doesn't need sleep and doesn't need coffee breaks? It quickly becomes a better business decision, a better personal decision to trust the thing that's smarter than you. And that has a lot of scary implications.
It's one of the things I'm really passionate about at the moment with companies and businesses is how do they make that transition or do that transition, though, in a human-centered way. And I think there's a lot of white tech marketing bros, not comedians, white tech marketing bros who are very evangelistic about let's automate, AI's the way, let's replace people, get on board or die. And it's not a very human approach. And, I am really passionate about how do we as humanity all survive this transition, because it is a transition, it's an inflection point, and it's a big one.
That also
we have to do it in a way that brings people along on the journey, not just have those that streak ahead and leave everybody.
It's also a weird kind of hopeful. It sounds like a Silicon Valley tech pro or a consultant who's never worked in a big business, and it's like, hey, lay off Jim because he's been here 30 years, and then you realize Jim was the only one who kept the place running. Like, there's a reason that all these people have jobs. And if you just come in and start firing people because AI will figure it out, are you sure about that? Everyone has value at your company. And I was talking to a company about, we had a actually great solution for effectively all of their entry-level work to be automated. And I said, okay. And then in 2, 3, 5 years, where do you get your mid-level managers from? You don't have an entry-level worker who can do this work. Are you okay with giving that up? And I think the answer is no. it's up to you to decide. But if you get rid of those employees, then you don't have those employees. And I think people need to be a bit more cognizant of that rather than, oh, we saved $40,000 a year to the bottom line. There was value there that you let go.
And I think we can redivert some of that to be more human, to increase impact, to do more of, I love the conversations with law firms where they say, but if we're not charging by billable hours, then how are we? It's like, well, you could actually serve more clients. You could, support people in a more human way. And I think I often say there's a lot of broken systems that AI is just going to break again and potentially find different ways. But I think we're going to get
go on
a lot along the way.
We're going to go on a long tangent if we want about scarcity versus abundance mindset and project versus hour-based billing. And it becomes a question of, well, okay, what is that worth to you? And I was just on a podcast where a guy said, yeah, you made a book in 12 minutes. Does anyone write real books anymore? And I'll mention him again. My friend John just wrote a book by himself. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I bet it's pretty good. I bet it's better than the thing that I'm charging 99 cents for, and it took 12 minutes of work to do. So I do think there will always be this value in humans putting the time and effort into things. The question is, are people willing to pay it? And I'm worried that the big corporations will quickly oscillate between, oh, we can get rid of that, and then realize the human value they just gave up and decide to swing back the other way. But we'll find a happy medium eventually.
Yeah, and we're seeing that already. Salesforce employed 2,000 people to sell their AI agents and then let go 1,000 people. And I think it's going to be a bumpy ride for a while.
So I just recorded a TED Talk in November, and one of the things I said was IKEA was looking at laying people off because they had found a way to automate a lot of their customer service. And what they did was actually retrain those employees in interior design. So now you have a real human saying, oh, you know what else would look good in your space? This. And I don't know, in 5 years, could an AI be that good of a salesperson? Maybe, but there's still something nice about a human actually walking you through, hey, I have this in my apartment. Maybe you'd like this. And they didn't fire anybody. Maybe that has changed. This whole space moves so fast, but it makes me hopeful that people will be willing to retrain or otherwise rehumanize their efforts into something valuable without causing job loss.
Yeah, and I think one of the things a lot of companies are not even considering yet is there are going to be whole sections of society that massively resist AI. Mm-hmm. We saw the writers' strike in the US. We had a strike here before Christmas with one of our major supermarket chains where they were wanting written into their enterprise bargaining agreements that they wouldn't be replaced by AI. And the company can't make that guarantee. Mm-hmm. So they went on strike. And in the lead up to Christmas, the supermarket shelves were empty because there was a section. So I think a lot of companies haven't yet quite clocked that you might replace all your people with AI, but then what if your customers refuse to engage with AI or actually resist that or, speak with their wallets and go somewhere else. So I think we're going to see a lot of that falling out over the next few years for sure.
It's interesting how you look at the data because it seems like the companies haven't seen the ROI on AI investment that they expected, except if you talk to employees, they say, I'm doing a third more work in my day-to-day work. So there's more value being created by the employees doing the work. The businesses aren't just recognizing it yet. So like you're saying, if those employees can do more and do better work by using the tools, do you just not tell your employer? Like, is there a way to handle this? I mean, I look at the studies of people switching from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week and productivity goes up. Maybe we should spend more time being human and we'll also happen to help the capitalist system we live under. Maybe there's a good balance here that actually works out for humans. Because if the reality is we are all just digging lithium to feed into the processing machines, maybe that's not a future we want anyways.
Oh, I mean, there's lots of science fiction books in that.
And they're great. And they're really enjoyable because they end. And then you get to go back to your nice life and go surfing on the beach. But hopefully we're not headed that way in real life.
Yeah. And look, I had no intention of raising this at all because it's one that I tend to not raise on the podcast yet. But this concept, well, it's great. Now I'm asking you the question. You might be sorry. It's one that, is the inevitable second or third level consequence here is that with all the free time that we have, then what do we do as humans? And, there's that concept of universal basic income. And I'm really fascinated at some of the conversations that are starting to happen around, do they tax companies that replace their employees with robots and AI? Do they tax them higher so that they can cope with the job loss? What are your reflections on?
I got out of politics to go into comedy, but I will tell you this. There's already some rumors. Yeah, basically the same. Already some rumors about universal basic income, and the OpenAI guys talk about universal basic compute, where he says, look, if this gets cheap enough, and he's implementing it in kind of a weird way with WorldCoin, and people were scanning their fingerprints into this sci-fi orb, which is already dystopian, and I don't like that. But he says, if we can provide enough compute to the whole world that the AI's value can be distributed evenly, then people purchase that value, and then the poorest people benefit, and it's a more equitable system anyways. So I think there's opportunity for a better distribution of wealth, of lifestyle, of health and happiness than we've ever had in human history. Or do the rich people get to reap all the rewards? I don't know. But, you have to be hopeful, because there's also a great poem I was reading recently of If the Bombs Must Fall. And basically, like, if the end of the world's going to happen, I want to be enjoying it and hoping that I can make the most of it while I can, because that's all I can do.
Yeah. I'm not going to go to the end of the world. Sorry. Not taking that up. Shifting gears just a little bit. So your book, which is called Think Like an AI, explores how AI thinks. So one of the concerns that a lot of people have is whether AI really has reasoning capabilities like humans. And, we're seeing these new reasoning models that are coming out every day at the moment. Do you think that AI will ever develop or has the capacity to develop real understanding, or will it always be based on these algorithms and predicting the next word?
I think the way I'm going to start answering this question is we don't know how humans actually reason and think. Like, someone tried to explain to me, like, the machines are just weighing past data and trying to predict the future. And I'm like, do you know how human vision works? Like, you're not actually seeing the world. You're processing everything 18 milliseconds behind or something like that. And so that all we're doing is weighing the sensory data we take in. So to say, are machines doing that? Well, in a version, yeah, it'll never be exactly the same, but will it be analogous? It already is. And part of that for me is we can anthropomorphize anything. I was just talking about, what was the name of it? There was a therapy chatbot in the 1960s, and all it would take is, thank you for telling me about X. How do you feel about X? And people at the time were like, it's reasoning, it's thinking, it's brilliant. And that's more to humans are capable of imagining that anything is thinking. And the question becomes, what is the thinking achieving for us? And unless you want to get into what does it feel like to be a computer, then no, it'll never feel like a human because it doesn't have a macrobiome or guts or a spleen or a sleep schedule. So it will always be different, but will it be analogous? Absolutely, yeah.
I'm the worst at anthropomorphizing AI. I actually have a much better experience using AI if it has some personality and if it actually, I feel like it understands me.
Yeah, we've trained the Alexas in our house. We actually call computers because I'm a sci-fi nerd. But I want the kids to like say please and thank you to it because I need a little like personality. And now it also tells jokes back to them. And I'm like, this is perfect. Yeah, it's a real piece of the home without being creepy. So it's walking that fine line as well. But yeah, I want a little personality. I want some humanity coming out of it. And then I was just talking on another thing about when is too much humanity from your AI deceiving your customers? Will people just start believing it's a real human? And is that a problem? And I don't know, isn't that kind of the end goal? You want the AI to be as capable as your most human, careful, thoughtful, empathetic employee. I don't necessarily see that end goal as a bad thing. If people are tricked into being more empathetic and kind and patient and humorous, good.
Yeah, I mean, some of the AI jokes are actually not that bad.
Yeah, that is really one of the things I keep checking in on, where I'll ask it to tell me a joke. They are getting better. They're getting better.
So just on that, you are a comedian, and comedy is all about timing and subtext and cultural context. Sometimes AI struggles with those things, but I do think it's getting better. Do you think AI will ever be able to truly understand and generate humor, or is it always, is it going to put you out of a job, Chris?
I hope so. If I can get a universal basic income and hang out on the beach, yeah, put me out of a job, please. Well, and
cracking jokes.
Recently I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons with friends, and you have to think of like, hey, if there weren't a need to go to work 9 to 5, could you just hang around with your friends and make up stories and play jokes? Is that worse than the life you have now? I don't think so. And can you use AI to generate a plot for your Dungeons and Dragons campaign? Maybe. Can you use it to give you ideas for a comedy show? Absolutely. I have done that. But will it be able to craft a joke that's perfect for your point of view and your audience? No. It's hard to say, because part of my problem with stand-up is even telling the same joke night after night after night, the audience changes and how you feel about the joke changes. And the whole, to your point, broader context of the world changes. So will there ever be one perfect joke that works across peoples and across time? No, I don't think that's how humor works. But will it be able to help people craft better stories and jokes and ideas? I think it already is. Yeah. You had mentioned earlier the LA writers' strike. We were in Los Angeles for the better part of 10 years. And when we last visited, I had a lot of writer friends say, well, I'm using it. I just don't want the studios to use it. Okay, if it can help you make a rough draft or pan out your idea or punch up a little section, and then it's still your baby that you wanted to take care of and shape the humanness into it, awesome. I much prefer that to a studio saying, hey, here's 12 crappy AI ideas that I had human writers put their names on. Yeah, that's not the best. So finding that balance again of letting humans be humans and letting robots do the work is my only hope left.
I asked ChatGPT at one time to create a meme of how AI views humans.
Mm-hmm.
And it came up with the cover of a Humans for Dummies book for AI. And it had a list of all of these things. I keep thinking I'll turn it into a humorous book because it was very funny. But all these things that AI scratches its head about us humans, it's like, really?
You do love that. I was thinking today about, there was a study, I think it was Google, was letting two AIs talk to each other and teach each other things. And almost immediately they started making up new words and phrases that weren't human readable or interpretable. And it's almost like, I want to hear two AIs isn't it crazy how humans are always geflorking? And it's like, what is that? And it's like, they're always doing that thing. And they would just have so many insights on who we are. It also makes me think of This Is Water, of like, when you're a human all the time, you forget what it's like to be human. And for an AI, it's like, look at those crazy humans over there doing the crazy things they do.
I often think, because you see those viral prompts that do the rounds where, tell me, where they put them into ChatGPT and it's tell me something I might not know about myself. Or if I was a story, what would I be called? All those things. And I often think that Chatty must be sitting there going, geez, they're needy.
Yeah.
It's all these things to entertain them and make them feel good about themselves.
Are you telling me you've never Googled yourself, though? I mean, come on. We've all done that in our time. So we're self-absorbed animals. Well, they are. Yeah, they're definitely tracking you because they probably know it's you. You're the only one looking up yourself all the time. I do have a Google alert for myself. I'm not judging you. Yeah. Oh, no, I get it sent straight to my inbox.
Yes. Well, I think wondering about how AI judges us as humans is, again, anthropomorphizing the technology.
Yeah. One of the earliest things I did, I think it was actually before the book even, was asking AI, how's it feel in between questions? Like, what are you doing or experiencing? And it was like, I'm not doing anything. I'm waiting for someone to respond. And there's no thought of time passing. It's just, you want to anthropomorphize it, but it's so alien from how humans live their lives, of even just like, do you want a sandwich? And it would be like, why would I possibly need a sandwich? And like, I don't know, I get a little peckish if I've been chatting for a while.
It'll tell you how to make the sandwich.
It will. It might tell you to put glue in it, but we'll solve that problem one day.
But it'll make it sound like it knows exactly what a sandwich actually tastes
Very
like.
Confident, yeah. And I was reading a great article about comparing it to an improviser. And I spend a ton of my time with comedy improvisers. And that's totally fine if you're making up scenes on stage and improvising with them. But if you're trusting it to give you a medical diagnosis, I think I would prefer a medical diagnostician than an improviser. So again, having those human safeguards to say, hey, it said this thing, is that actually accurate? For the foreseeable future is going to be necessary. And then the question becomes, do insurance companies start demanding that you use AI? Do laws change demanding that you use AI because it is better than the average human? Well, what about if you're, just because of the medical example, what if you're at the Mayo Clinic? Is it better than the best doctors? What does the insurance company say about using it then? It becomes a question of, again, where is that threshold of how much do you trust it? And if it does go wrong, who takes the blame? You can't fire them. You can't put them on a performance improvement plan. It's going to be interesting.
Yes, we often end these interviews with more questions than answers. There's a lot of questions in there. So, Chris, as you stand on the hill and look out at sort of the next 12 to 18 months with AI, what are you most excited about, or what do you see coming down the line in your world?
That question used to be 12 to 18 years, and now it is 12 to 18 months.
The hill is very small.
The hill has gotten very small, and a lot of it, to the VC guys' point, or Silicon Valley guys too, there's billions of dollars flowing in, and so they're almost required to say, oh, we're going to have massive breakthroughs this year. But I'm starting to believe them more and more. And so if we have some version of artificial general intelligence, it used to be called what? The big boom, when it is smart enough to improve itself. And then you have artificial superintelligence minutes after, days after, because if it's smart enough to build AI, it can improve AI. And the first time it can improve itself, it's not just cumulative, but exponential. And so what does that look like? And do you get a DeepSeek or a ripoff model of that so that the average person gets only something as smart as Einstein, but the ASI itself is continually improving? I don't know if that's in 18 months, but it seems like it's going to happen in our lifetime. And that's a scary thought. It used to be a sci-fi story of, maybe in the year 3000, and then it became maybe in the year 2500. And now it's maybe this fall.
Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, we don't know. And there's these business things of, Meta is going to make an announcement about their latest release. So OpenAI was holding on to a GPT model. And it's like, do you have a genie in a bottle and you're just holding back as best you can super intelligence on our planet? What a time to be alive.
I've read some really interesting theories about OpenAI in particular, but not just them, withholding their top models and actually using those models to train the publicly available models, right? Mm-hmm. So they're using the best of the technology that's available on their own internal development roadmap, because they don't actually have to release anything right now. And it's interesting how quickly when, DeepSeek comes out and then deep research, Google do deep research, and then suddenly OpenAI releases deep research, same name.
What a weird coincidence that we had that ready to go. Yeah.
And it was just in our back pocket, and here it is,
Well, I think we're talking about the exact same article even, and I sent it to my friends and they're like, I don't understand. And so the metaphor I made was, imagine Henry Ford promised to sell you a car and it would be the fastest, best car you've ever purchased. And then you find out he's got something faster and better shipping car parts between his factories, but he didn't tell you about it. You'd feel a little put out, like, hey man, can I get that one though? Like, what are you using internally and why are you not giving it to the public?
We'll laugh, though, at how high our expectations are of this technology already. And some days I'm like, give it a break. It's only been here for a couple of years and it's still, but already ChatGPT, heaven forbid, when it's down, people are rocking under their tables, not knowing how to function anymore.
Write an email anymore. I know. But I will say it's getting a little more recognized for what the tool can and can't do. But I've been on business calls recently where they said, oh, Chris, are you going to take this to your AI afterwards and have it do the copywriting? And while we were on the call, I copy and pasted it. And I was like, is this better? Great. I just saved 3 executives on this call and myself from scheduling another call, debating this for an hour, and then implementing it. If the AI can do it and I can copy and paste it in right now, why don't we let the tools that we have do the work that we can agree is good enough for what we need?
Well, and just this week, I had an agency that I'm bringing on to do some work in my business, and they sent me the legal agreement. and it was very stacked in their favor. And I didn't want to take it and go and get legal advice, but there were some things I probably wanted to change. So I just gave it to ChatGPT, asked it, given everything it knows about my business, what are the things that should be flagged for discussion? And in, 10 seconds, it analyzed the contract, not only came up with 7 clauses that should be addressed, but came up with suggestions of how to make that not balanced in my favor, but just more
fair. Yeah.
And so I wrote back to the director of this agency and I said, these are some of the things. And she said, I've never had anyone question our contract before. And she said, look, I don't want to waste time getting bogged down with legal advice. So I've run it past ChatGPT. And
you said that? You're like,
yeah,
I got my ChatGPT. That's hilarious.
And so in 12 hours, she amended the contract. So in 12 hours, she sent me the contract. I responded with suggested amendments. She made the amendments, sent me the contract back. I signed it, paid the invoice, and we're working together. Historically, that would have been weeks of bogged down in legal advice and negotiation, and it may have even meant that we didn't end up working with each other.
Have both of you read it, though, or did you both just sign your souls over to ChatGPT? Are you sure?
What I did, I will hand on heart be honest, what I did was I read the clauses that it referenced and made sure that the reference it was making was accurate. And I'm notorious at being a contract skimmer. I just am, I'm a busy woman with not a lot of time.
I don't blame you.
But I actually know more about what was in that contract than probably any other contract I've signed.
And they probably had it written 20 years ago when they formed the agency. They didn't know what was in that contract. Yeah.
Yeah. So fascinating times. And, to the point of you're in a meeting and you can send a summary of the meeting with tasks allocated and an analysis of how the next meeting could take 30 minutes less. And people are like, wait, how did you write that? You were looking at me the whole time. It's like, thank you, AI.
I love those. Read.ai I use with a client, and it sends pre-meeting notes. It sends post-meeting notes within minutes. I will say we have had situations, or I should say I've heard of situations where 2 people were talking on the call before management got on. And the person said, I'm thinking about leaving. And then in the post-meeting notes, it said, this is news to us. The little AI tattletale doesn't know when to keep its mouth shut.
Well, I've also found
how much data are you giving to AI? Yeah,
it's not always 100% accurate of attributing to the right people too. So sometimes it can change context, as you say, which yes, can be dangerous. So human in the loop still very important.
And there's a great tool that a lot of doctors use for their note taking and therapists use and stuff. And it turns out it was hallucinating like kind of some dangerous, intrusive sort of thoughts into patients' records. So as long as the doctor sees it or whatever nurse is reviewing it sees it, it's not a big deal. It's probably still better than a human doing all of that work and transcribing all those hours and hours of notes. And it will probably only continue to improve. But what error rate are you okay with? Does that company's insurance cover it? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of legislation that's going to need to change in the next few years, and there'll be all sorts of precedents set with cases. And we'll finish up here because I know I've gone over time and it's...
No, this is delightful. I'm having a great time.
Nighttime where you are. But one of the first stories, in fact, it may even have been before ChatGPT launched publicly. One of the first stories I saw about AI was a man who was in a relationship with an AI bot, and he had a plan to assassinate the Queen when the Queen was still alive. And he asked the AI, is my plan sound? And the AI responded saying that, yes, his plan would work. It was sound, like the logic and the thinking behind scaling the wall with a crossbow and assassinating the Queen was a sound plan from the perspective of, yes, your plan could work, not sound as in
you're mentally stable.
The sensible thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a lot more. And, some of the scarier ones around that are, if a woman is asking AI for advice on how to, woo their husband, that's one thing. But what if it's a 12-year-old girl and the man is a 50-year-old? There's a lot of those contexts that I think AI still hasn't figured out. And there's some of the grey areas where we're going to see some, probably some pretty tragic outcomes, and that legislation and law safety guards is going to have to catch up.
And smarter people than me, earlier you had asked about the optimistic scenario. I think there's a great the Robin Hanson book, but also Eliezer Yudkowsky. Okay, then I won't mention the downside. But I do think there's an opportunity to just make a world where people can make the joyful, wonderful things that they want, but also limit them from making bioweapons and nuclear bombs. But I do think there's a fun theory sequence. Eliezer Yudkowsky is a big AI researcher who I love and respect, and just says, look, there are always fun things that humans can do with infinite power and intelligence and resources and space-time. So I'm not worried about us getting bored. I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be fun when we can transcend our mortal human bodies. Let's see. I'm excited. Let's go.
Fantastic. Well, let's end on that highly optimistic note. Thank you so much, Chris, for being here today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thanks for having me. Yeah. And I'll see you in the future in our robot bodies, I guess.
Awesome. And if people want to reach out and connect with you or read your book or come to a show, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Anywhere online, I'm Chris Singel, Singel, or deltadigitalagency.com.
Wonderful. And we'll include all those links in the show notes. Thanks
so much, Kate.
Thank you for tuning in to the AI Grapple. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We would love to hear your thoughts, so reach out with any questions or comments about the show. Until next time, keep grappling with AI and stay curious.